Rowland Eustace. Some people call you the godfather of Irish falconry. Why would they say something like that?
I haven't a clue. Why would they?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that you were always very good at getting young people interested in falconry. You always did a lot of work towards this. Can you tell me why you felt that was important?
Well, I like passing on stuff to young people. I did it with the bees as well. You know, I introduced about 30 people to beekeeping, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I suppose could I claim 100 for hawking?
Probably at this stage,
because we had only kestrels in the beginning, and the lads were able to get them quite easy, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, a lot of them drop out, as they do in the beekeeping. Yes, one sting and they're gone, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you got interested in falconry? How it started for you?
Yeah. Well, I was interested in all nature, insects in particular. Started off with, and then I ended up training seagulls. And I went from seagulls to hawks to a kestrel, which I got from the zoo. Those days, got from the zoo, which had come in, you know, as that somebody had found it, and we trained that to the stage where it could fly to the lure very well. And I'd had lure training with the seagulls beforehand, believe it or not. Yeah, but it ended up as rat food. The rat managed to drag it down through a gap, you know. But then I got interested in the sparrowhawks, and in those days we didn't have any proper regulations or anything, so I had to rely on bird catchers. They were illegally trapping small birds, and they'd kill any hawk that came in and killed the lure bird.
Mm-hmm. And
the lure bird, of course, they had to train it to sit on a stake and sing so as to draw in the other goldfinches and so on. And a merlin would spot it, of course, and come in, and the merlin got the chop, because you're not coming back again. And same with the sparrowhawk, got the chop, you see. But then they discovered they could get the price of a pint for the hawk, so they didn't get the chop anymore. Yeah. So this was first conservation.
Right.
Was the fact I stopped them killing. But eventually, anyway, we became legal, and we were able to get licenses quite easy for the kestrels.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to start with buzzards, you know, because the sparrowhawk is pretty tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And we had no buzzards available, so we started with kestrels. But I love getting the lads going on them, you know, and it took them away from other activities that they shouldn't have been doing. Yeah, and some of them were very, very keen. There was a group used to come down to me every Wednesday, or their half day at school, every Wednesday and every Saturday, and they would walk about 3 or 4 miles, but they would walk through people's back gardens and take shortcuts like this down to my house.
Mm-hmm.
And they would help me. We were building pens at a stage that helped me doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we worked with the kestrels, and some of them got very good at them. The book said kestrels don't hover, you know, when you're training them. But at one meeting we had every kestrel hovered for at least 20 seconds, you know, or 30 seconds above them.
Mm-hmm.
And at one particular meeting, kestrel took a baby rat, much to the owner's great excitement. But it was mostly frogs, of course, yeah.
It's a great beginner's bird, isn't it? But you never see any beginners flying them anymore.
Yeah, because they're tough. Mm-hmm. And they don't take nonsense from you.
Mm-hmm.
They lose their temper if you mess with them, you know. And they can use their beak if they're not happy, and
they can teach you manners.
Yeah, teach you manners as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're very famous for being probably the only person around who's breeding merlins and encouraging the flying of merlins.
Yeah.
Can you talk why are merlins important to you?
Well, the merlins. What started me on the merlins first I had read some book there on Merlins. I forget now who it was. I'd written a very good book on Merlins, and we started inquiring, and David Norris started telling me that some of the stuff in the book was wrong, that the Merlins were no longer nesting on the ground; they were nesting in trees and finding different things like that. And then we applied for a license.
Mm-hmm.
And got a license, the only one ever issued. Yeah, that was that's one date I remember, 1984. And a pair bred the following year in a little nest box with stones, yeah. And David then helped me. I wasn't very good with the writing down, keeping records, and I'd write them down one day and forget them the next, but he was keeping records and all the rest of it, and they got more and more into them. And then of course when we had our first ones we wanted to fly them, so that was another big learning curve, because we knew what we were supposed to do, but they didn't need entering, and we got up on the moors almost straight away, and we were flying the lure. They were fantastic, and then we were flying them loose.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great excitement, yeah, a different phase again. So then I was breeding them, but other people started breeding them then, but I think I was the first to breed them here in Ireland. I know others had attempted all right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but...
You always preferred short-wing talks to long-wing talks, but are you right in saying that?
Sorry?
You always preferred short-wing talks to long-wing talks.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
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 You tell me, for your own hunting.
For my own hunting, yes, sparrowhawks, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they were the most fun of all, because you could work with other people, which you in the early stages you had to work on your own, but I wasn't a great one for teamwork really, you know, but then we had the beaters, and they caused as much excitement as the hawk itself, you know, and enjoyed great sport with them over the years.
Mm.
Yeah.
You had the goshawk too, didn't you?
I had a goshawk too, yeah. I brought the first goshawks into Ireland.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, an Irish chap who was living in Germany got in touch with me on the phone, and we were always trying to get goshawks. We were trying to get them from the Welsh Hawking Club and other people, but no, we hadn't succeeded. So he suggested he could get us some for nothing, but it was going to cost money to get them over. So started a little fund for the goshawk scheme, as we called it, you know, and they all put in 50 quid or something. Then we had to put a bit more because we found the air was going to cost more and so on. But he flew me over at his own expense to München, and I was introduced to his apartment at night because I'd arrived late. He brought me into the children's bedroom. He had about 8 or 9 children at that stage, right, all in the one room, and at the ends of their beds were a goshawk sitting on a large pole, which I didn't think was terribly healthy for the kids, you know. But then we went to get licenses to export them. And I had strict instructions when I was going over to bring black bush with me, you see. So we had to go to various vets and they had to get their black bush, you know.
Bush whiskey, yeah.
So we got the certificates all signed, right, and we got to the airport. I had made 2 boxes myself. I had no idea what the size of a goshawk really, but I guessed. So I had 2 in one box and 2 in another box divided.
Mm.
And I had padlocks on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
So the Department of Veterinary, or the Agriculture Department here, we had to have a license from them, and they were quite sticky because they had to go into quarantine. And again, David Norris arranged the quarantine for us down in Wicklow.
Mm.
But I got to the airport anyway, and he tells me, don't go to the to the ramp, you know, where you take off from, you know, the spot. Check in, but don't go there till they call you. You see, because we no export license for the hawks. He tells me at this stage, yeah. Afterwards, he told me that my freedom was on the line at that stage. So next thing they call it, Herr Eustace, you see. So I went down anyway, and here were the 2 boxes on the tarmac, and 2 fellas with what looked like the rifle, you know, what do you call them? Kalashnikovs.
AK-47.
Yeah, standing there, and with big revolvers and whatnot, and hand grenades and everything. Are these yours, you know? I said, yes. And they said, go ahead, you know. So I nearly fainted. I could barely get up the steps into the plane. We had to walk up into the planes then. So I got home with them, and the department were waiting for us, rushed over to me when the 2 boxes came around the roundabout. Those the hawks, yeah. Can we look at them? I said, no, you can't. It has to be in an enclosed place. So they said, well, we bring you into this little room. So they brought me in there and said, can you let me look at one? And I said, yes. I got out my keys, you see, opened the lock. And as it happened, one of them was, 3 of them were this year's birds, I'd say. And the other one was older, you know. I don't know how much older, but it was a mature bird. So I didn't actually know which one was in, but I happened to open it, and I had a flap door, where I opened the flap up, an inch out shot a talon, right? And they said, oh, that's all right, close up, yes, close up, you see. And it was only some time after, it was about a year after, I discovered that the actual papers had been altered from 1 goshawk to 4. But anyway, they went into quarantine, and I was to get one for my troubles, and the others were sold then to, I think, 3 people or something like that. But I started training it then, and I had it for, I don't know, barely a year, I think, and I fell into the trap, which you nearly fell into a few times. Yeah, I flew it to please my friends, you know, and it was getting later, darkish in the evening, so I flew her, and of course lost her in the trees, right? And she was discovered. Apparently there was an itinerant campment nearby, and she must have flown into them, and she'd been picked up, and they tried to sell her, I don't know where or not, and then somebody said they found her dead somewhere. I don't know how true that was. But that was the end of my goshawk. But I was out with other people with the Mora, but it was the one of all the birds I wanted really to fly, but I couldn't either afford the time or the money to do it, and I need plenty of ground, right? So I wouldn't have been doing it any favour, you know, really. Yeah. So then I concentrated on the sparrowhawks after that, and got them trained on the larger birds, kept them away from the small birds, which was grand, and got them weighted on magpies, wood pigeons, and I had quite a few hawks over the years. One I had for 7 years, and a friend of mine in Carlow had one almost the same time. We used to hunt together, and what the next stage was, here's my track now. Yeah, I found out how to get them very strong by flying them up high. I used to climb up a ladder. Originally, I used to fly one from the attic downstairs, out of sight by
Mhm.
calling it,
Mhm.
and it would come down and learn to respond to my call, you know.
Mhm.
But then I used to do it on a ladder where they'd fly up and strengthen the wing, with the result then that I had a hawk that could knock down a wood pigeon very well, and so on. And I think that's about it on the sparrowhawks, you know. But every sparrowhawk I had was different. Different temperament, different appearance, different colour.
Mhm.
Definitely different. But the way I used to train them at first was I used to sit in a garage at the end of the garden in the dark. I used to sit there in the dark, and I had a torch then that I could give a little bit of light, and I would sit there for hours with the hawk until it started feeding on my wrist by tickling its feet
Mhm.
and rubbing it, you know, encouraging it, talking to it. And on one occasion, it started to lash rain outside. It was very heavy. There wasn't much of a roof on it, so I could hear the rain belting down. And next thing I saw the hawk looking down at the ground, and hear froglet after froglet after froglet coming in under the door.
Mm.
I thought the frogs liked rain, but these obviously didn't, you know. But that was the way I started the training at that time. That was before we started imprinting them,
Yeah.
you know. So
Did you prefer the passage birds to the imprint birds?
I didn't have a preference one over the other. It was just lucky if I got a passage one. But they found them just as good. Though again, the reaction was different when they hunted. If I hunted with them off the wrist, they wouldn't go directly for what I was spotting or they spotted. They would go to cover and manoeuvre around and attack from a different... I thought they'd gone off on me, you know.
Mm.
And next thing I saw them coming round towards me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and getting a flock into a flock that way.
Yeah.
That's when they were flying at smaller birds.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Can you talk to me about what the major differences you see in falconry today compared to the ones back when you were starting out in falconry? What's the biggest difference?
Well, the bigger difference really is that people have more money and some people have more time, right? So they're able to afford better equipment, and there is better equipment and all this new modern stuff. I'm hoping it doesn't turn the birds eventually into an automated one. But back when we were doing the hawks and that, there was only a few people. There was the like of Johnny Morris was flying a peregrine. Other people got peregrines, but they hadn't a clue what to do with them, you know. And there was nobody really to guide them, you know. And so we didn't see much real falconry, you know, as such. It was all short wing stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But later years then, they, as I say, they have more time and they can buy hawks, you know, and they import them. And at that time we couldn't import anything without great difficulty, you know. You had to go through all sorts of ridiculous things, you know, to get the hawk.
Mm-hmm.
They had to come from an area that there hadn't been any foul pest in for the last 10 years or something, all this sort of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so it's changed a lot now, and it's much more visible, you know, and there's more people, of course, a lot more people flying birds, which is great, you know.
What advice would you give to a young person starting out in falconry?
To get somebody, a good falconer, to help them for a start, yeah, because and make sure they've read the books, right, know how to tie a falconer's knot and all this sort of thing before they let near a bird, and then they should be, you know, guided with somebody, as we did in the old days. That if it was a young person, we had to sign their license to say that they, you know, that before they got their license, we had to sign a thing saying we were checking them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say yes, and not to be too ambitious, not to start off with the goshawk or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that in the years to come, buzzards will become more available, because there'd be a better one for youngsters to start with, because it's easier checking their weight and everything, and they're, you know, they're better to handle, they're more robust, you know, than the kestrel. And the kestrel seem to be getting a little scarce anyway. Yeah. So hopefully it doesn't get any scarcer, because they're a lovely bird, and they can get great fun with them. And you know, George Luke, if you remember, yeah, he took one there late on, because he was, you know, saying, people were saying to like myself, I get too old to fly birds, you know. But I think that'd be the best thing, that they get good guidance from somebody, you know, and that they keep with them. And then they have to get somewhere to hunt. If they want for a bigger bird, they must have somewhere to hunt, you know, and they must be prepared to drive a distance, you know. We can hunt with the sparrowhawks reasonably close to a city or town, but certainly with the other birds, you have to be well out of town, so it means a lot of driving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Hope I didn't talk too much.
No, it was great.